You're about to hear a story that left even the brightest minds in total silence. Picture this, a group of world-class scientists, decades of research, Ivy League degrees, global recognition. They're sitting in a remote African village, deep in the middle of nowhere, trying to explain the universe using data, physics, and cold, hard facts. And then, an 8-year-old boy walks in. No PhD, no lab coat, just bare feet, a dusty shirt, and eyes full of wonder. He doesn't speak at first, he listens. Then, with nothing but calm, he says something that stops everyone in their tracks. If God made the stars, why wouldn't he love me? Silence fell over the room like a heavy blanket. That one sentence, from a child who didn't know quantum mechanics or astrophysics, hit harder than any scientific theory they debated for weeks. Because here's the thing, science explains how the world works. Faith explains why it matters. And this little boy, he wasn't there to argue. He was there to remind them that logic and belief don't always have to fight. They asked him how he explained thunderstorms, droughts, the movement of the sun. He answered with simple truths from his daily life. The sun rises because someone makes it rise. Trees grow because they're cared for. If everything has a beginning, then someone must have started it all. It wasn't a textbook answer, but it was human. And none of the scientists could refute it without sounding cold, distant, or disconnected. Some of them later admitted, in private, that this moment changed them. One said he cried driving home, thinking about how easy it is to lose your sense of wonder when you spend too much time chasing knowledge. Another told his wife he finally understood what his son had been trying to tell him for years. This kid didn't see science and faith as enemies. To him, they were just two ways of looking at the same sky. So I ask you now, have we become so obsessed with finding answers out there that we forgot to look inside ourselves? Do you believe faith needs proof, or is feeling enough? Think about it. And if this story moved you, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe, because stories like this, they don't just stay in Africa. They travel through time, through hearts, and sometimes change the way we see everything.
There's a village deep in rural Africa where life moves slow, and the stars shine brighter than anywhere else on Earth. That's where Kwame grew up. He wasn't like other kids. Sure, he played, he laughed, he chased chickens and climbed trees like any 8-year-old, but there was something different about him. Everyone called him the Watcher. Not because he was quiet, he wasn't, but because he always seemed to be looking beyond what everyone else saw, like he was trying to understand something bigger than himself. His clothes were simple, his feet bare. His school, a wooden shack where one teacher taught 5 grades at once. But none of that mattered. Kwame had something more powerful than books or technology. He had questions. Big ones. Why do the stars blink? Who made the wind blow? If the sun sleeps at night, where does it go? His mother used to smile and say, "That boy talks like he's lived 1,000 lives." She had no idea how right she was. One morning, a group of scientists arrived in the village. They weren't tourists. They were researchers from top universities across the world. Biologists, geologists, astrophysicists, people who spent their lives chasing data, not dreams. And then they met Kwame. He was helping his grandfather plant cassava when they first saw him, smiling, focused, dirt under his fingernails. They didn't expect much. But later that day, during a break under the shade of an ancient fig tree, one of them decided to ask, "Hey kid, do you believe in God?" It was a simple question, But Kwame didn't answer right away. He looked out at the horizon, then picked up a small rock and turned it over in his hands. "I do," he said quietly. "How do I know he exists? Because everything has an owner. That stone has a place. The tree has roots. The river has direction. Even I have a name. So who takes care of it all?" Silence. One scientist chuckled nervously. Another cleared his throat. Someone scribbled something down. No one had a response. The next day, another researcher tried to push further. He showed Kwame a portable telescope and explained how planets moved, how the Earth spun, how life emerged by chance in the chaos of the universe. Kwame listened carefully. Then he said, "All of this is beautiful, but if we've learned so much, why are people still starving? If we know air is important, why do we keep polluting it? If we know life is precious, why do we treat it so badly?" No one expected that. Suddenly, the conversation shifted from the stars to the soul. And then came the line that echoed through the conference halls, social media, and even the hearts of some of those scientists. "You're all looking up at the sky, but you forgot to look at the person standing right beside you." That night, under a sky full of stars, Kwame sat with one of the scientists. They didn't speak for hours. They just watched. One saw numbers, equations, theories. The other saw stories, promises, love. And maybe, just maybe, in that quiet moment, something deeper was born. Not faith, not science, understanding. It was the final day of the conference. The kind of day where everything feels like it's wrapping up. Reports are written, data is compiled, handshakes are exchanged. But then, something happened that wasn't on the schedule. Something unforgettable. Kwame walked into the room, alone, calm. No invitation, no microphone, no translator, just him. His mother had tried to stop him, worried he might be misunderstood. His grandfather simply smiled and said, "Let him go. Sometimes the quietest voices carry the loudest truths." When Kwame stepped into the hall, conversations paused. Heads turned. A few scientists looked up from their notes. Others exchanged confused glances. He stopped near the stage and spoke without asking permission. "I've been listening to you talk about the world, but I haven't heard anyone talk about the people who live in it." Time seemed to freeze. Some smiled quietly, others shifted uncomfortably. One of the lead researchers gave a subtle nod, as if silently telling everyone to just let the boy speak. And he did. Not loudly, not dramatically, just truthfully. He started by talking about the river near his village. How, when he was younger, he used to drink straight from it. Now, the kids get sick after playing in the water. He talked about birds that used to sing every morning. Now, they're almost gone. He talked about the wind, once a friend that cooled the air. Now, it carried dust and drought. "You have so many tools," he said, "but you forgot how to listen to the earth crying." There was a pause. Then he looked directly at the scientist who had spent nights under the stars with him. "You study the sky, but you don't see the pain of those living under it." Silence fell over the room. Not the silence of dismissal, the silence of realization. One of the scientists whispered to another, "He's not here to judge us, he's here to remind us." Kwame stood there for a moment longer. Then he said the words that would follow them all long after they left. "When you go back home tomorrow, don't just bring knowledge, bring care." And with that, he walked out. No applause, no goodbye, just footsteps fading away. In the moments that followed, no one knew what to say. Until, finally, one of the scientists stood up. "We should include his words in the final report," he said, "because maybe, just maybe, they were the only real truth spoken here in 3 whole months." Kwame never saw that report, never read the praise that came after, never heard the way his words traveled across oceans. But they did, and they touched hearts that thought they'd already heard everything. Sometimes the most powerful lessons come not from textbooks or telescopes, but from a child who still knows how to look up at the sky and still believes someone is looking back.
It started with a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. Dr. Elias Moreau was supposed to leave the village the day after the conference ended. Like every other scientist, he had flights to catch, reports to write, and meetings back home. But something about Kwame kept pulling him back. So, instead of leaving, Elias stayed. Not as a researcher, not as a teacher, just as someone who wanted to listen. And so began a quiet friendship between a boy from the dust and a man from the labs. They walked through the forest together each morning. Kwame pointed out medicinal plants, explained how animals behave before storms, and described how the color of the river changed with the seasons. Elias listened. And for the first time in years, he felt small. Not in insecurity, but in awe. One morning, they stopped under an ancient fig tree, roots tangled like stories written into the earth. Kwame looked up at the sky and said, "You study the sun like it's just light, but it shines the same on everyone, rich or poor, city or jungle. It doesn't choose." Elias smiled. "It's neutral," he said. Kwame turned to him. "Then why don't people shine like that too?" The question hit harder than Elias expected. He didn't answer right away, because deep down, he knew Kwame was right. As the days passed, Elias recorded some of their conversations, not for research, not for lectures, just so he'd have proof that this boy existed, that he really talked like that he really saw the world like that. One afternoon, while watching ants build their tiny world in the dirt, Kwame said, "You use microscopes to see small things, but I see the same world with my eyes. And I see that everything has a place. Even the ants know what to do. So why do people need so many rules to live?" Elias didn't respond immediately, because for once, he didn't have an answer. Word began to spread. Other scientists started visiting the village. Some came to learn, others just came to hear. A group of young biologists from the US brought illustrated books on medicinal plants, only to find out Kwame already knew most of them. His knowledge wasn't in books, it was in memory, in soil, in tradition. But none of that seemed to impress Kwame. He didn't want to be studied. He didn't want to be famous. He just wanted to keep being himself. Until one day, Elias asked him a question no one had asked before. "Do you think God created science?" Kwame thought for a long time. Then he answered, "I don't think he did. I think men invented science to understand what God already knew. But sometimes they forget that science is meant to serve, not to rule." Elias stared at him, and for the first time in a long time, he felt peace. Not religion, not faith exactly, but clarity. From a child with nothing, but everything to teach. When Elias finally left, he gave Kwame one thing, a blank notebook. On the cover, he wrote, "To write all the questions still waiting to be born." And then he walked away, leaving behind a boy who changed the way he saw the world, and taking with him a truth he would carry forever. Sometimes the greatest wisdom doesn't come from labs or libraries. It comes from a child who still sees the sky and believes someone is listening. In a village far from the noise of cities and the rush of modern life, time moved differently. There was no Wi-Fi, no television, no fancy schools, but there was something more powerful:
Time to look at the sky. Time to listen to the elders. Time to feel the earth beneath bare feet and understand the rhythm of the seasons. That's where Kwame grew up. He woke before sunrise, helped his mother cook cornmeal, fed the chickens, gathered firewood with his grandfather. Sometimes he went to school. Other times he stayed in the forest, watching how the leaves danced with the wind. No one could have predicted that this boy, with no access to labs or libraries, would become a quiet storm in the world of science and faith. It started small. A short article written by Dr. Elias Moreau, published in a little-known scientific journal. It was just a personal reflection, titled, "What I Learned from a Boy of Earth." Most people didn't read it, but those who did never forgot it. Then came the ripple. A biology student shared it online. Someone translated it into Portuguese. Another person turned parts of Kwame's words into a video with images of African landscapes. And like seeds on the wind, the story began to spread. At first, many doubted it. Is this even real? Or is it just another made-up viral story? But the scientists who were there confirmed it. Some even began sharing their own versions of what happened when they met the boy who spoke like he carried the soul of the land itself. One day, a letter arrived in the village, stamped with foreign seals, written in elegant handwriting. It came from Oxford University. The letter read, "Dear Kwame, your thoughts on the relationship between science and faith have reached us. We would like to invite you to participate in a cultural exchange program on ancestral knowledge and sustainability." Kwame read it twice, slowly, while his grandfather watched in silence. "What's an exchange?" he asked. "It's when you go learn somewhere else," the old man said, "but you bring everything that makes you, you." Kwame folded the paper carefully and placed it inside the notebook Elias had given him. He didn't say yes, he didn't say no. That night, sitting under the ancient fig tree, he looked up at the stars and whispered, "I'll go, but not to lose myself. I'll go to show there's another way to see the world." And months later, he left. It was a bittersweet goodbye. His mother cried, his grandfather smiled. The other kids begged him to bring stories from the sky of distant lands. When he stepped onto foreign soil for the first time, Kwame wasn't overwhelmed. He was curious. He looked at tall buildings, fast cars, lights that didn't come from fire. But he also saw something else. People moving fast, eyes glued to screens. People forgetting to look at each other. During a packed lecture at Oxford, he stood on stage and said, "You have so many books, but I have a living library. It breathes, it changes, it teaches." A young researcher asked, "How do you know so much when you're so young?" He smiled, "Because I listen. And sometimes being small means seeing things the big ones can't." That night, alone in his dorm room, he wrote in his notebook, "Today I saw the world they call progress, but I realized they need to learn how to come home again." Even far from his village, Kwame remained true to who he was, a pure heart, a voice that mattered, and maybe, just maybe, the greatest teacher the modern world never expected.
Kwame came home 6 months after his journey to the West. He didn't return with parades or headlines, just a quiet bus ride, a worn-out notebook, and a heart still full of wonder. The moment he stepped off the road and onto the red earth of his village, he ran straight to the ancient fig tree, sat beneath it, closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and smiled. He was home. In the weeks that followed, life returned to normal. He woke early, helped his mother, walked through the forest, watched the stars. But something inside him had changed. He now knew his words had traveled farther than he ever imagined. Across oceans, across minds, across hearts. Back in the world beyond the village, something incredible was happening. His story wasn't fading, it was growing. Videos of his talks were being shared across social media. Teachers used his quotes in lessons on environmental ethics. Doctors quoted him in discussions about healing and humanity.
Children wrote school essays titled "The African Boy Who Spoke to the Earth." A French filmmaker started documenting his journey in a small independent film. A group of students in Brazil launched a school project called Science with Soul, inspired by Kwame's words. You have many tools, but you forgot how to listen to the earth crying. And yet, Kwame never saw any of it. He just kept living as he always had. One night, his grandfather asked him a simple question. Have you changed? Kwame thought for a long time, then looked at his hands, the sky, the ground beneath him. I'm still me, he said, but now I know I can help more people than I ever thought. Years passed. The village began receiving visitors, not tourists, but students, researchers, and teachers from nearby communities who wanted to learn from the way they lived. Kwame became a bridge between old wisdom and modern knowledge, between science and spirit, between logic and love. He never wanted to be a leader, never sought recognition, but somehow he became exactly that. A voice for those the world barely hears. And when people ask why a single child could bring together minds so different, the answer is simple. Because he spoke from the heart. Because he saw the world with clear eyes. And because, above all, he reminded everyone what truly matters. Not what we know, but how we feel. So, if there's one lesson to take from Kwame's story, it's this. Sometimes the greatest wisdom doesn't come from books or labs or universities. Sometimes it comes from a child who still believes the stars are listening. And maybe, just maybe, they are.
If you made it this far, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, turning on the bell so you never miss stories like this. The kind that touch hearts and make a real difference in the world. And let me ask you something. What would you do differently if you knew your words could change the world? Leave your answer in the comments below. Your words might be exactly what someone needs to find courage, faith, or purpose.